Before we jump into today's show, I've got a really exciting announcement to make. The autumn cohorts for Start Your Podcast group program are now open. There are 5 dates between September and October, and it's a 6-week program that will get you launched before Christmas. So if podcasting was on your to-do list this year, if you really want to get your podcast up and done by the end of 2023, then come and join me for one of those cohorts and let's make it happen. I have a free masterclass available for you called Understanding the Power of Podcasting. You can go over to donnaeade.com/masterclass, watch the masterclass and get access to that enrollment. I hope to see you in one of the autumn cohorts very soon. That's donnaeade.com/masterclass. Let's get back to the show. Today we have Camilla Fellas Arnold, who is a former freelance designer, wedding photographer, and lifelong multidisciplinary creative. She now works as a creative coach and podcast host for Creative Power, helping people unlock their gifts and achieve their creative potential and embrace creativity in their lives. You're listening to the Wedding Procast UK, the place to be if you are a UK wedding professional looking to grow and streamline your business. I'm your host, Donna Eade, 10-year wedding photography veteran and CEO at the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors. If you want to grow and streamline your business, this is the podcast for you. Make sure you hit subscribe where you listen or join our email list at www.spwv.co.uk. You'll find the sign up form at the bottom of every episode, and by doing so you won't miss a thing. So let's jump into today's show. If you are feeling your creative power is more of a fizzle than a bang, listen into my conversation with Camilla Fellas Arnold. Welcome to the show, Camilla. I am so excited to have you here. We've already had a little bit of a chat off record, and our lives just parallel in so many ways. This creative buzz is inside all of us, I think, somewhere buried. And today we're going to be talking all about creativity. So before we jump into the meat and bones of today's show, can you let my listeners know a little bit about you and what it is that you do?
Well, I actually had to think about this, if I'm being honest, because this is the first time in quite some time that I'm actually explaining who I am and what I do. It's morphed quite a lot since I last did anything. So now I am a creativity coach and I help creatives in building their business. And I also help people, not just creatives, but I support people in developing their creativity, embracing it, just reaching their potential. And all of that has come from, I think it's about a decade now, maybe more, who knows, but working in the creative industries. Basically, I started off as a freelance graphic designer, book designer, and I was in the trenches, like struggling with all of the things that freelancers do, trying to build the portfolio, trying to get the work, pricing issues, you name it. I've been there, and it started to become, I'd suppose it was a bit of a love-hate relationship, but more leaning towards hate. I just became disillusioned. There was some incidents that just made me feel like I don't want to do this anymore. So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to put it all to bed. I've had enough of book design. I don't want to see another book. I don't want to see another logo. Not interested. I'm going to go to something that I also really love doing, which is photography. And I've loved that since I was a teenager. My first camera from my dad, it was like a little tiny point and shoot. It had one button and that was it. I was in love. So I thought, I could do wedding photography. Started my own business doing the wedding photography. It was going beautifully. I was loving it all the way until I had a panic attack at a wedding. I was solo shooting 2 hours away from home in a field. There was no phone signal. It was honestly one of the most horrific moments of my life when I realized what was happening. Because originally I was like, I feel really, really weird and I don't quite know why. And I was trying to take all these photos, and then it started raining, and I'm thinking, what is going on with me? Because I couldn't concentrate. And then I kind of had this moment where everyone went to sit down and eat. I thought something is going on, and I thought it through. I'm having a panic attack. It's 1 p.m. What do I do for the rest of the day? And I kind of stumbled through it, and it made me feel like I can't do this. It's not fair on me. It's not fair on the couples. It was awful. It was a worry. It was a burden I didn't want to have. So I finished all my weddings that I had going on. I took my husband with me as a second shooter. I taught him the basics and said, pretend you're a second shooter. He did actually take some really good photos, but that wasn't why he was there. He was there to watch me. And then I just didn't book any more weddings. And I thought, I don't know what to do now, because creativity is my life. I've been self-employed, freelance for so many years. I'm pretty much unemployable. Like, no one's going to want to have you in the 9 to 5 because you're so used to being your own boss. That's how I felt. And all of my skills were creative. It was hard to find in Norfolk, where I am, it was hard to find any decent jobs anywhere. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll go back to what I know, freelance design. Did that and kind of fell back into designing books for people, friends mainly. And it morphed into publishing their books. I set up my own little publishing company. And as I was starting to help these people, they were coming to me saying, I need help with the writing rather than the publishing. Like, that was fine, but they hadn't actually finished the writing process. So I was doing that, supporting them, and realizing very, very quickly I was limited by my own experience of the writing. Because
I was going to say, because writing was something that you've always loved, like back into your childhood was something that you were really geared towards until, you got some knockbacks in your younger days.
I had quite a few knockbacks, yes. So I'd always dreamt of being a writer. It was my thing. And then I'd had this incident with a family member who basically said, they looked at a little book that I'd made, a little story I'd written, and said, oh, well, it's never going to be as good as like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. It's not that quality. And I'm sitting there at like 8 years old thinking, well, no, of course it isn't. It's 24 pages. But what I heard at the time was, you're not going to ever be that good, so don't try. So I'd spent my entire life as a teenager and then as a creative in my 20s, staying around stories and books, but not writing them as myself. And as I'm trying to mentor these writers in my business a few years ago, I'm thinking, I can't help them anymore because I don't have the writing experience. That's blocked off for me. Like, I've shut it down because of how much trauma. So I thought, I don't know what to do now, because they're still needing my help. They believe in me and my business. They want to work with me. We get on. And someone suggested coaching. So I thought, okay, I'll go get a coaching qualification because I don't know what else to do, which I started, and I wasn't quite prepared for how it would open me up. As it was the personal transformation that it gave me more than anything. And what I realized as I was going through it was, it wasn't just writing coaching I wanted to do, it was all of creativity. It didn't matter whether you were a freelancer, a photographer. It didn't even matter if you didn't think you were a creative person and you just wanted to start. It's just the idea of creativity that I love. I love seeing people just open up when they start to do something, particularly when you get someone who says, oh, I'm not really a visual person. That doesn't do it for me. I remember being in a coaching session with some people, and we did some metaphors using some images of trees. And someone in the class prefaced the thing by saying, I'm not a visual person. These things don't usually work for me. We were like, okay, no worries. Just answer the question. Just do it. Just try the exercise, see how it goes. And by the end of it, she just said, oh my goodness. She was practically in tears, like, wow, this has really opened something up for me.
Yeah. Because
they weren't expecting it. It came from somewhere different. And that's what creativity does. It just comes from this deep place within us, and it's what I love. So I've kind of been able to bring all of my experience, all of the things I've learned and done, into now I help creatives, non-creatives, just everything within the creative sphere, and I love it. It's very enriching, very fun.
Oh, it's so good. And as I said to you before, like there are so many parallels between our lives, and it was very strange. I used to write stories all the time. I never showed my mum and dad, but I used to write stories. Me and my friend used to do it in our bedrooms. We'd just write each other's story and then we'd swap and read them and stuff like that. And then I got my first camera. I came into a bit of money at the age of 13 and I bought my own camera. And, you know, I'm a little bit older than you. It was film back in my day. And I had to send them off to TruePrint and wait 3 weeks for my photo.
It's a frustrating wait.
Triple print, double print, and TruePrint. I used to get them all. Why I needed like wallet-sized versions of two wallet-sized versions of all my photos, who knows? But
of course you do.
You know, photography has always had a very special place in my heart. Like I always say, you know, when people say, oh, what would you save from a fire if your house was on fire? And I'm like, family and pets aside, it's my photos, because they can't be replaced. Everything else is replaceable. You can't replace my memories. So I'm like, those would be what I go for. And
I hear you.
I've got such a strong connection with weddings, and every moment that you have spent money on and time on is captured in those photographs. And so when I was a wedding photographer, I put all this pressure on myself that this is what you know, they spent thousands of pounds on this wedding and I am the one that's got to capture it all, because these are going to be their memories. These are going to spark the, oh, do you remember that conversation? Oh, do you remember when Aunt Sally said that? Do you remember in the speeches when Dad said this? And all of that is going to be stuff that they're looking back on, and it's my work they're going to be looking at. So it best be good. And I put all this pressure on myself. So, you know, we spoke before and I said that an anxiety issue was what pulled me out of weddings. So I completely sympathize with that.
It's a massive responsibility.
It is. It is.
I don't think people realize. They just think, oh, weddings are lovely. You know, oh, it must be so much fun to be a wedding photographer. You get to go to
anything in weddings. It's so funny how people just think that we're all just floating around, not doing anything, enjoying the day. It's like, no, we're actually doing all the hard work so you can float around and enjoy the
Honestly,
day.
It's so exhausting. Just go to a wedding. You know, I've done it where I've actually driven for like 2 hours, gone to the wedding the full day, and then had to drive home, and I'm on the way home like windows wound down, I've got cold air blowing on me, I'm singing at the top of my voice to the radio just to keep myself awake. It's so exhausting. People don't realize. And it's not just the physical, it's a long day, it's also not just the mental thinking about it, it's that emotional release of, oh, I've finished. I've got the photos. I've done everything I can. There's nothing more I can do. There's like that release that comes with it. There's so many things when you walk out of that door, you think, right, I can turn the camera off now.
Yeah.
It's a massive responsibility. It's huge.
Although for me,
it's not as fun as people think it is. There's so much to it.
Although for me, whereas, you know, obviously you talked about having the panic attack at the wedding, and I get all the anxiety before, and then on the wedding day I'm on and I'm just focused and I'm just getting everything I can, trying my best. And then at the end of the day, when you're getting your, oh, thank God for that, I'm thinking, great, now I need to get these SD cards home, I need to get them backed up, and until I'm backed up, that's when I go. So it literally, the anxiety disappears for the day, and then as soon as I'm done, it's like I need to get these SD cards in a fireproof safe.
I hear you. I managed to keep that until like the next year, the next day even. I'd be able to just kind of put that to bed of, oh, I've just finished the day, let's just try and get home, we'll worry about that stuff tomorrow. And then because I was so exhausted, I didn't have energy to even think about, do I have it in me to go on the computer and download these images? So then the next day, new anxiety does arrive, and I'm like, oh, I've got to make sure the photos are okay, nothing's corrupted.
Oh God,
I back them up a million times, I need to edit them.
Oh, it's crazy. Anyway, we're going to move on from the wedding photography drama. because we could talk about it all day because we've both been there. But before we move into the topic of our conversation, the creativity stuff, I just wanted to touch on something that, Camilla's got a podcast and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And I happened to listen to an episode the other day, and I heard her talk about an incident that she had with a previous client and pricing. And it really made me perk up. I was just like, oh, and I literally made a note of it because I thought it was such an important story. And I was so proud of you. Like, I don't even know you. And I was so proud of the way you dealt with it. And I would love for you to speak on that a little bit, because I think a lot of us in this situation would cave or, not feel like we could do anything about it or not have the strength to walk away. And I just found it really fascinating. So could you tell that story for us?
Yeah, thank you for being proud of me. And I think actually that is really important, that understanding our own worth and not being afraid to stand our ground. I mean, I've been there. I've struggled to win work and I've lowered my prices and then really regretted it because of the precedent you set. But this is the one time that I didn't do it. And you know how you think, you have all those fears of, if I lower my prices or if I don't lower my prices and I won't get the work, I'll lose. All of these things did happen. So the worst did happen, but I still stand by it was really important to do. So basically what happened is I was working for this freelance book designer, this little company. I've been working quite some time with them. It must have been several years. We'd been just doing books together. Previously, I'd just come out of university. We'd agreed some prices and it had been absolutely fine. So they'd come to me with a project. They'd say, this is how many pages it is. This is the kind of cover we want, etc. They'd say, can you come up with a quote? I'd send it. They'd say, fine. We'd do the project. I'd get paid. No worries. So this project came along and they were saying, oh, it's written by someone well-known, they're relative of some, so it's going to be quite a prestigious book, shall we say. It had a little brownie point in it, I suppose, to add to your portfolio that you've worked on this book. And so they said, this is what we want, can you price it up? Which I did. And they came back and they said, can we, I think it was something like £1,700 that it came out, because it wasn't a particularly long book. And they came back and they offered me, I think it was about £400 for the entire project, flat fee, which is about 75% less than what I'd quoted. And I sat there and I thought, I can't afford to do that. I mean, I know I was young. I was probably 24-ish. So I know I was fairly fresh out of uni. They probably thought I was maybe a little bit naive or something. I don't know what was going through their head. Maybe they were just trying to cut down on costs. Who knows? But they thought that was acceptable. And I sat there thinking, that probably doesn't even work out to £1 a page or like £1 an hour by the time that I've spent the time that I would on it, because I knew that from previous work with them, the scope can change.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. You particularly when you do like a flat fee price and then the scope changes and you're kind of stuck. So I was like, I don't know what to do. For a little while I was like, oh, do I just cave? I'll say, yeah, it's okay. And then I thought, no, I can't, because if I do that, they'll come back to me again and they'll say, can you do this one for £300? And then I'm trapped, because I wouldn't have enough time to do other work that would actually make me decent money. I'm then just stuck in this cycle of just working for them for pennies. And I thought, I just can't do it. It's not okay. I value myself too much for that. And then what they did is they started to intimidate and bully me a bit. They were saying, oh, well, if you don't, we won't give you any more work. We'll tell other people about you, that they won't work with you either. And I was like, when you have that heart-stopping moment where you're like, oh, maybe I should say, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Maybe they're right. Yeah.
Maybe like, what if this is the end for me? Like, this is the end of my career as a book designer. What am I going to do? And I just thought, yeah, but I can't. I really, really can't. It's just not sitting right with me. I could feel it right deep down inside.
It was so far under your asking.
I know.
Quote,
I didn't understand.
you know, if it had been a couple of £100, you might have gone, well, it's a lot of work they put my way, fine. But so far, like, what were they thinking?
I couldn't even understand where they'd got that figure from. It just made zero sense. And I thought, I can't accept it. So I said no, and I stood my ground. I got emails from so many staff members, like way up top, you know, trying to frighten me into saying yes. And I said no, because they were fairly small, you know, they didn't have like hundreds of people. So they did still want to work with me. And I just said no. And do you know what? Yeah, the worst happened. They didn't give me a single other job. But you know what? It was important to take that stand, not just for them, because they went out and found someone else, and who knows what they paid them. That's not really relevant to me. It was important for me to say, you know what, this is not acceptable, and just make that stand. And it's one of those moments that I kind of look back on and I think, wow, that was really amazing. Because
I had balls.
yeah, like I was only in my early 20s, not long out of university. That
So
was a
brave.
big deal. And particularly because I didn't have loads of other clients in the space. I didn't have that regular, they were mostly my regular income. So it was a big deal, but actually it's something that I do think not enough of us do. We do get scared into lowering our prices, accepting things, accepting contracts and works that we know don't sit right with us. But we're all intimidated, afraid, worried about the worst that can happen. And honestly, the worst that happened for me was they didn't give me another job, and I just had to go look for other stuff. And it did kind of force me to do a lot of soul searching of, what do I really want to do? Do I still want to stay on this treadmill of trying to win work that doesn't really pay a lot? Because even the quote that I'd given them, that wasn't a substantial quote. That was just, you know, kind of on the low end of what I probably should have been charging.
Yeah.
But you do what you think is right at the time, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I want to pull out of that is something that you just said that I think is really important for particularly people in the wedding industry to hear and understand, is that if you had taken that job, you would have been spending hours and hours doing this work for next to nothing, which would have taken away time that you could have spent doing a job that would have paid you more. So when we're sitting there with a client and they're trying to haggle and they're trying to say, you know, so-and-so down the street only charges half of what you charge, try and keep that at the forefront of your mind. If I take this job, if I lower my standards, if I lower my worth, I'm not going to have the time to pick up another job that will pay me what I'm worth. And remember, if you're pricing yourself correctly, you only need a certain number of weddings in to hit your targets for the year. And so you don't have to take every single job that comes through. It's not about, it shouldn't be about just getting them to sign on the dotted line. It should be about marrying up whether you two click and the personalities work, and whether you are the right person for them and they are the right couple for you. And so I think that was really important, because I think it is something that we do get scared, especially after the 2 years that we've had where income has been very scarce, and you know, we've had so many cancellations, refunds, postponements and all of that it can be really easy to go out there and just take everything that's offered to you at whatever price it is offered to you at, because of that fear. And you know, I think it was a very brave thing that you did, very brave thing.
I think it's also hard when it's easier when you're more established and you've got your bar of whatever your pricing is, and you can turn the work away because you've got the steady income, the stream coming in. It's harder, and this is why I'm so proud of myself for doing it, when you're in the beginning stages, when you're trying to build that business, build the clients, because a lot of us do get work from word of mouth referrals. So when you're in those early stages, it's so tempting to just take anything that's going, no matter how little it pays. But then you're eating away at your time to work on marketing yourself to get something that does pay better. So it's almost like try and hold your nerve. It can be really, really hard. And this is where I come back to the idea of, with creativity, understanding your own worth and kind of believing in your own authority of, you know what, I know my value. This is what I'm worth. I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to lower my standards or encroach on my sense of self-worth just to win something, because you know what, there are people who will pay at all different price points.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're kind of fighting for, we're all competing in that really low ball space. But actually, when you come out and say, do you know what, I'm worth this much up here, however many thousands that is, you kind of set yourself apart and almost make yourself more magnetic and attractive because you've embraced your own sense of self-worth, and it just magnetizes people to you in a different kind of way.
Yeah, love that. Right, let's talk about creativity. Let's talk about it. I mean, we have been talking about it, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. How important do you think it is for creatives to do unpaid creative work for themselves?
I think it's massive. I think it's something that no one gives enough weight to, because we all get so caught up, and I've done it myself over the years. You get so caught up in doing the work that pays, and it's not just like actually doing the physical, I need to make a social media graphic, I need to photograph the wedding. It's the marketing and the admin around your business to win that. So you get kind of like that tunnel vision of, if it's not making me money, I can't do it. But what I've found is creativity feeds creativity, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, what you're doing it for. In fact, having your own personal practice that doesn't get you paid, that you're doing it just for fun, is so beneficial, because yes, it feeds all your other creative ideas, but it takes the pressure off. It allows you to do something just for you. It allows you to experiment, which then can inform your professional practice more. There's just like so many reasons why having your own personal practice, personal creative practice, is just as important, and we don't give it enough time. We don't even consider it, because we're so focused on, is it making me money?
Yes. Oh, it's so true. And I find that for myself, like that when you're being paid to do something, it's like almost that you're almost clocking. If you're doing it for yourself, you're clocking the hours. Like if I was doing this for a client, I'd be earning this much right now, and I'm doing it for myself, so I haven't got that time to do it for a client. And I have found myself doing that, and I stopped doing my photography for myself, because I was so involved in the business, and I was literally working all of the hours and didn't give myself that time. And what you just said there about creativity feeding creativity is so, so true, because I think any of us in the creative space, if you look at when you're most excited and you're most creative, it's when you're doing it all the time and you're sort of putting in stuff for yourself. Like I got really excited over Christmas making some Christmas presents for my family. I have creative spots all over the place, and I was doing some sewing, I was making, and I was so happy and I was enjoying it, and I stayed up late to do it. I mean, my neighbors would probably really thank my sewing machine going off at 10 o'clock at night, but I didn't care. I was really enjoying myself. And that led me to actually having great business ideas, because I'd given my brain the space to stop and think about something else. So what I wanted to ask you was, when we're looking at sort of doing creative stuff for ourselves, what should we be looking at doing? Should it be like what we do for our job? So for me, it would have been photography. Should I be going out with my camera and playing with it? Or do you think there's a benefit of finding an alternative creative enjoyment, so that maybe that connection of, if I had a client for this, I'd be getting paid for it. So if we swapped, what do you think?
I think there's benefits in both, because if you are a photographer and then you start having your own personal projects that you're working on, in terms of like technical things, you can experiment, and that can inform your practice. So that's beautiful. But in terms of getting you out of your head there's nothing like just stepping away from the camera and saying, do you know what, I'm going to go take up pottery, I'm going to go to a class, I'm going to learn to draw, I'm going to just craft some things, whatever it is. It kind of removes you from that situation, because we can get so stressed by the things we're doing. We don't possibly realize it, but we're so focused on, is it making me money? And I've got to do all the things, I'm wearing all these hats, I'm being the admin, I'm being my marketing, I'm being my social media manager, I'm being all of these things. So it kind of becomes a little bit stressful to even think about the creative part, even though we love it. So sometimes just taking yourself completely away from that and saying, you know what, I'm going to do something, and I might not be very good at it, but it's for fun, it's for me, no one needs to see it. You just never know what idea that's going to spark, how it might help you see something differently, the ideas it can generate. So I think it's worth doing both, to be honest. But it's also one of those things to kind of sit with yourself and say, what is most beneficial for me? Is there some ideas that I have for my photography, for my design, that I want to practice, but I can't do it with a client? So then definitely go try that in your own time. Or is it actually, do you know what? I just can't see the wood for the trees anymore. I'm in my own head. So then something completely different can be the best route forward. And sometimes it's a mixture of all of those things. Like you do a little bit of your own, you know, you stick with photography, have your own personal project, and you're doing this and you're doing that. Because like for me personally, I think of myself as a multidisciplinary creative. I do something of everything and I love it. And they all inform each other. They all feed off each other in like really unexpected ways. You just don't know how it's going to work.
That's so true. That's so true. I find it really interesting, actually. And I'm going to ask your thoughts on this, because you have firsthand experience of it yourself. Is like, what about when you're told, you know, well, you're no good at that. You're no good at that. And you kind of touched on it. But for me, with you, it was your writing. With me, it was art. And it was like, and it was self-inflicted. I don't remember any adults telling me that I was rubbish at art. I just remember drawing something and thinking that looks crap. And like just constantly telling myself, I can't draw. And the funny thing is lovely lady in my world, Amy McLaren, had this power up week. We had a really good week in her group, and she brought in an artist to take us through a drawing class. And this artist talked to us about, you know, the techniques of drawing. And, you know, we didn't get like a list before. We didn't even know what we were going to do. This week was complete surprise to everybody. We're just like, power up week. Okay, women, we've got this. And we had no idea what we were going to do. So I turned up there with my, you know, normal pencil, and this woman's got all these different types of pencils. And she was like, I know you haven't got all the pencils, so I'm just going to use the one that you've got. And we're going to draw this calla lily. And I was like, yeah, that ain't going to happen. And as she took us through the process of how she draws, we drew with her. And I had to leave before the end of the session, but I went back and I finished my lily. And when I looked at it, I was just like, dang, girl, that looks like a lily. Like I was so impressed. Amazing. Like I was impressed with myself. And I was like, I can draw. And one of the things that I've always wanted to pick up is calligraphy. I've had calligraphy sets when I was younger, and my sister actually bought me one probably about, I want to say about 7 years ago. I haven't ever picked it up. Like it's in a box somewhere, and I haven't done anything with it because I haven't made the time. Like you were saying, mate, you've got to make the time for it. And I haven't made the time because I know it's something that takes practice. And so I haven't done it yet. For Christmas, I've got a chalkboard that sits in my hallway, and every month I change what it says. Amazing. You know, when we first moved in here, it said welcome home and all of this stuff. But it's always just been my, you know, rubbish chalk drawing. Yeah. And I actually got up a a Merry Christmas in sort of calligraphy chalk on my phone. And I sat there and I drew out the lines and I copied it.
Fantastic.
It was good. I was just like, I can do it. I just don't take the time to do it. So where are you on that sort of spectrum? Because obviously you had people telling you that you couldn't write, and you know, and there might be people out there that are like, you know, I couldn't do pottery, or I couldn't do glasswork, or whatever it is. How do we kind of like move out of that zone?
I think in terms of my writing, it was a limiting belief that I picked up from just a comment someone had made. And I'm going to be honest, I'd completely forgotten about the incident until I really sat with myself and thought, do you know what? I had this moment where I realized a couple of years ago, oh, I don't have a creative personal practice. I don't do anything other than if it's making me money. So I was unpicking, like, why is this, and really digging into it. And then suddenly this memory, I just remembered it. And I thought, oh, that explains so many things. So then then it's about unpicking like the memory, the belief, you know, do I even want to listen to that person? What do they know about art or writing? Why should I listen to them? I think there's a big piece about your own internal authority on the matter, because everyone's got an opinion, but if we listen to everyone else's opinion, we wouldn't put pen to paper, we wouldn't take the photo at all, we wouldn't start anything if we were listening to everyone else. There's this whole, I think we're all obsessed with labels. Like, think about a school, you get the sporty one, and you get the arty one, and you get the really smart one, and then there's the dumb one, the clown. We're kind of obsessed with whatever labels we give ourselves or get given. We then forget to take them off our heads. Like, we walk around saying, do you know what, I'm not a creative person, I can't draw. And it's like, well, says who? Because actually you can draw, because everyone can put a pen on a paper and you know, make lines,
do something.
But our perception is that we can't draw well. So I think what it is really is giving yourself permission to be really crap at something.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to be rubbish as long as you're having fun, you're learning, experimenting,
and enjoying it. I was going to say that.
Yeah. And I think that's what people forget. They're like, oh, I don't have time for this. And what it is you don't have time for it, in my opinion, because you know you're not going to be good immediately, and you're not prepared to be rubbish today. But it's one of those things that, you know what, we actually take time to hone our craft. Just because we can go out there and take the most beautiful photo, we can draw a portrait that looks like it's a photo, it's that good. Just because we can do that, we forget that it took us 10 years to hone that craft. And then it's like, well, actually, I'd really like to write poetry, or I'd really like to make like glass sculptures or something. And it's like, you know what, your first one's going to be rubbish. It just is. But that's how you learn. Because if it's perfect first time, you just don't learn anything. I mean, if you look at like famous artists, for example, and you look at their most well-known or well-loved painting, the one that everyone says this is the best one that they've done, was that the first one they painted? No, it wasn't. You know, they honed the craft. Okay, you may sometimes get people who are quite gifted and they've got like this natural talent or flair for something, but even then, they will still try and perfect it.
Yeah, still comparing their first to their now.
I mean, like, even think of someone like Usain Bolt. He can run really fast, but he is still going to want to try and do a little bit more. He's going to want to be more streamlined, run a bit faster. There's always something they're going to want to improve. So that, coming back to that idea of it's okay to fail, as long as you're having fun. I think it's really important lesson that we forget, because we're so focused on making money when we're being creative. It gets all kind of blurred and
bit murky,
jumbled up.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think in the wedding industry, you know, a lot of us are creatives. Like, whenever I think about any of the areas that my members in the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors are part of, and just weddings in general, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, that's creative, that's creative, that's creative. And being able to take that time for yourself to be creative, because if you have chosen a creative career, you love creativity. It's part of your DNA. And if you're not taking that time to grow it and to nurture that side of you, that's when we start to get burnt out and overwhelmed and stuck in a rut and feeling like we don't want to do this anymore, or feeling like we're not doing our best for our clients and things, because we're not feeding that creativity. Like you said right at the beginning, creativity feeds creativity. So we need to take that time for ourselves. We need to be able to feed that creativity so we can be the best that we can be. So heading on, before we sort of closing out, what is it that you do for your creativity, Camilla?
Well, this is quite interesting. My practice fell away. As a teenager, I was obviously taking photographs, but I was one of the ones that was making blinkies and blends, that when it was a big thing. It was like really popular. I loved doing it. So I was always making something at home. And as I went through university and then into my freelance practice, it all stopped being fun and I just didn't do it. And then last year, as I was looking at, well, what would my creative practice look like? And I was thinking to myself, well, in the ideal world where I've got all the time and money, etc., business is flowing, what things would I be doing? And suddenly I remembered, oh, I wanted to write poetry, write stories, non-fiction, fiction. And the funny thing is, throughout the years, I have had so many stories, plots that I've just written down, like full outlines, and I just can't get myself to sit down and write because of this limiting belief of, well, it's never going to be as good. It's never going to be as good as Lord of the Rings. So why bother trying? So they all sat there in piles and, I've got them all hidden away. And what I started to do, and it's very, very new, but I started to write a poem every single day. And what it's done is, it was a very cathartic process, but it started to really open up my ability to write in general. So I'm actually looking at this year, I'm going to run a writing challenge, and one of the books that I've got like written somewhere, I'm actually going to write it as I run the challenge with other people, because it's like writing feeds my soul. It's the thing that I wanted to do when I was younger. So that's my main creative outlet right now, and it just brings so many new ideas to all of my other stuff, because I'm then moving through, because obviously I'm working as a creativity coach, so I'm helping people with all kinds of things like building the business, imposter syndrome, etc. But as I am moving through my own creative writing, all of those things come up in me, and then I'm like, well, how do I deal with it? So how can I help other people deal with it? And it's just, as I said, creativity feeds creativity. It all flows in ways that you just couldn't imagine. So for me, writing is the thing that I've really come back to. And it's just been incredible to actually, it's like I can't stop. The words just keep coming and coming. I just write and write and write. It's almost like feel like I'm writing like I'm running out of time. I just can't stop it. It just has completely unlocked and makes such a difference to how I feel. Really brings me joy.
That's brilliant. And I think that's so important, because you're literally there living what you're preaching, which I think is so important to see, and to see that it is having an impact for you. So it could certainly have an impact for us. So before we close out the show, I'm definitely going to be putting all of Camilla's links in the description, in the show notes, so that you can go and follow her, because if she's doing a challenge, I challenge you to take part when she puts that challenge up, because it's something that a lot of, maybe people who do stationery have got a little bit of writing in what they do, in the fact that they do invitations. A lot of us will be doing blogs and things like that for our websites and stuff, but writing isn't really part of the wedding industry per se. Maybe celebrants with writing vows.
It can be really helpful in terms of positioning you as an expert. if you're doing like a non-fiction book, it can be so useful to say, do you know what? I've got a book to go with that. Here's my knowledge. It opens you up to another audience. So sometimes having a book, even though it doesn't seem like it's the most obvious thing for wedding photographers, you'd be surprised if you kind of niche it down. Book. Do you really? Oh, wow.
Yes. I didn't do it through a challenge, but I was getting so frustrated by the number of people that were getting ripped off by would-be wedding photographers that I wrote a book called The 7 Biggest Mistakes You Can Make When Hiring Your Wedding Photographer. And it's nothing grand. It is just basically these 7 things that I put in a book and put up on Amazon, because I was just like, if somebody wants to know what they need to do when they're hiring them, I want them to get it, because I don't want them to be ripped off. But definitely a powerful thing. And even just the process of going through the challenge, even if you don't publish a book at the end of it, it will hone your writing skills, which will improve your blogs. It will open this path of creativity through writing that might just have an impact on other areas. So definitely take part in it. But before we go, Camilla, tell us a little bit about your podcast and why people should come over and listen to that and subscribe, so they know what to look out for.
So my podcast is very, very new. I think we're on episode 8, came out yesterday or the day before. I'm not sure. Can't even remember what day of the week it is today.
We're still in that fog from Christmas and New Year. I get it.
Yeah, we really are. So it's very, very new. It's called Creative Power, and it's all about helping you step into like claiming your creative potential. So, I mean, my most recent episode, it's called How to Stop Fear Arresting Your Creative Process. It's literally about all of that imposter syndrome, fight or flight. I've got other episodes about things like building your daily practice, whether that is, it can be a creative practice, but you can apply those things to literally anything in your life. It's about the idea of just opening up creativity to anyone, and also giving people who are creative a new lens of, well, how could I look at this differently? How can I enrich my practice? So I'm kind of bringing together all of my experience and just pouring it in to these episodes. And honestly, I can't stop. The ideas are just coming. So if you feel like you want to open up your creativity, do come over and have a listen. It's very new, as I said, but it is a very fun journey. And I've got one episode particularly that I have to mention. It's called The Creative Concept of Meraki, which I've got a lot of really good reviews from and good feedback from people on, because the idea of Meraki is, it's a Greek word, and I have Greek Cypriot heritage on my dad's side, so it's like a personal thing. But Meraki is, it's when you pour your heart and soul into something that you're doing. And I talk about it in terms of how it can be exhausting for people and how they can be afraid to do it. And I just think it's just useful for anyone who is creative to listen to, because you know what, it's tough out there. Pouring your soul into what you do can be exhausting. It can just be something you feel drained, and it can be scary as well. So we need all the support we can get, and I hope that through my episodes that I can help other people feel supported and thrive, find the joy in the process.
Brilliant. We will definitely link that episode in particular in the show notes, and we will link the podcast as well. Go over. The great thing about getting in on a podcast when it first starts is that you can catch up and you can listen to every episode, and you don't have to think, what did I miss? Like, I've got terrible FOMO when I go and join podcasts that are like 300 episodes in. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to listen to all of them. But you can get in right now and listen to all of those 8 really quickly, catch up. So thank you so much for your time today, Camilla. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found that conversation as interesting as I did. Please do hit the subscribe button where you listen to this show and share it with your fellow wedding industry professionals. Thank you so much, Camilla, for coming on the show. Best of luck with your podcast. Next week, we'll be looking at the word should, and why you need to stop using it. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Don't forget to hit those stars and leave a review of the podcast where you listen if you found value in what you heard today. It's a free way you can help the podcast reach more people just like you.